Hello, I am Lexi Tondor. This is my final project for World Religions with Professor Trent. And so I included this little clip art for the spirit of Halloween, since it is the 31st of October. Unfortunately, I'm doing this project somewhat last minute because I had COVID this past week. So apologies if my voice is a little bit raspy. Now, the 3 podcasts that I chose for this project were those of Gauri Vanidasa, Dr. Heather Sanderson, and Ray Buckley. The religions of those being Hinduism, Buddhism, and those of North America. And to kick it off, we're going to first look at the ultimate reality of these religions. And so, with Hinduism, according to Gauri Vanidasa's tradition, our origin is from God, that God being Vishnu. And Vishnu means all-pervading. And so he or she is eternal, and therefore we are also all eternal. And so God has no end or beginning, and neither do we. And there's a word for this, that word being Atma, and it means that we are all part of God's collective consciousness. And so basically, in this sect of Hinduism, individuals are tiny aspects of God that will exist forever beyond the mind and body. And we exist essentially because Vishnu did this out of joy. He had this desire to create the many. Now, with Buddhism, Dr. Sanderson tells us in her appearance on the podcast that the ultimate reality for Buddhists is cyclical in nature. And so there is this beginningless cycle of existence known as samsara, where all living things are reincarnated. So there's this life and death repetition. We've all had past lives and will continue to have lives in the future unless we break free from samsara. So it was the Buddha who first discovered this and gave the world the 4 noble truths. Those being that there is suffering, desire is the root of suffering, we can stop it, and here's how we stop it. And it's the Eightfold Path, which is the method for stopping it. And so once someone were to break free from samsara, they would enter parinirvana, no longer being attached to this world. And without these attachments or desires, you no longer need to suffer and be reincarnated. In the North American religions, a lot of times the origin is from a creator who made the world. In Ray Buckley's Lakota tribe, there is a great spirit who is said to reside in all things. When it comes to the Mayans, they believed that a powerful deity made people from cornmeal and water, and the Zuni say that people emerged from underground. Now, what do all of these ultimate realities have in common? Both the Hindus and Buddhists actually believe in samsara, and samsara is the continuing cycle of life, death, and rebirth. And so, because they both have that in common, that is just something they have in common. And on the left here is a representation of that cycle. And as far as the Native Americans go, they actually believe in cyclical time, which is somewhat similar. And in our textbook, the Introduction to World Religions, there is a record of the Black Elk explaining how children come from the great mysterious, and the elderly return to it. And so the native people believe that life and death repeat like the seasons. Now we'll get into a way of life. There are some commonalities between Sanderson and Buckley's way of life, at least how they describe it in the podcast. And so what they have in common is that basically Sanderson explains that serving others is an aspect of Buddhism that she's very much drawn towards, and that there is an ultimate goal to help others. And in Buckley's episode, he tells us how the Native Americans have been helping the sick during the pandemic, bringing them food and cleaning out their honey buckets. And so this shows how both religions believe that helping others is important to how they live. And this kind of ties into Sanderson's ultimate purpose, that being the ultimate purpose is to become this enlightened being, she says, where we can benefit other sentient beings, end quote. And so basically it was, the Buddha first realized how to end his own suffering through nirvana, and so then he went on to teach others. And so this is the ultimate purpose for Buddhists. And so, continuing with Sanderson's way of life, something that I personally found very interesting is how she lives her life, analyzing her behaviors. And I found that a little bit different from Dasa and Buckley. And so she analyzes herself, asking questions such as, what kind of things get my anxiety up? And she does this because she has had past incarnations which impact how her emotions and mind work. And so if she can understand herself more, it may also help her end suffering. And the word actually for suffering in Buddhism is dukkha. And so besides this being sort of a contrasting point, it's also something that kind of inspires me to want to try. If I could perhaps try and understand my emotional side more, perhaps I could live a better life. And so finally, we'll discuss Gauravani Dasa's ultimate purpose. And this ultimate purpose for Hinduism in his tradition is to develop a spiritual identity. And this is a process which includes having a relationship with God. And so, basically, Dasa tells us in the podcast, quote, with God, we develop a spiritual identity and a relationship with God that lasts forever. And this relationship I find very interesting because it can be anything. It could be motherly, brotherly, it could be a friendship, but essentially we're living as an individual in this life, but God wants us to essentially, we can help please God and have a relationship with God by treating God in different ways. Dasa gives an example where, you could treat God as a mischievous kid if you wanted to. And then, so if you were fatherly, that aspect of yourself would last forever. That would exist with God. God would remember you as being this fatherly figure. And that concludes my final project. Here's a list of the works cited, which will also be included in the Word document. Thank you so very much for listening.